Hello, and welcome to today's live chapter reading of Gravedigger Academy 2 by C.A. King, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Bacon crunched between her teeth. It was overcooked, exactly the way her brothers liked it, and she hated it. Still, the break from the silence was a welcome one. Months of being ignored was taking its toll on her. Her family hadn't even bothered to take the time to tell her why they were upset. It could have been because of the rules she broke during the school term, or the fact she had been assigned to Gravedigger Academy in the first place. Both weighed equally in the disappointment department. There'd been no letters advising of a change from one academy to another, and under the circumstances, Michaela didn't expect one, albeit her mother might have. Hildebrew continued to search the mail every day. That was a waste of time. All the woman had to do was ask. Headmistress, Meat, had made it quite clear she'd be returning, even if it were merely a precaution. Proper authorities wanted to keep an eye on her in case she took up her ancestors' line of work. The bacon clunked as it hit her plate. When are you going to stop acting as if I don't exist? Michaela asked, glancing around the table. Her brothers wouldn't even glimpse in her direction. Whatever are you going on about? Hildebrew asked, busying herself with filling glasses with coffee and juices. It's almost time for the mail. Mom, Michaela blurted out, sit down, please. There isn't going to be a letter for me. I'm not being transferred out of Gravedigger Academy. I'm sorry if it embarrasses everyone, but those are the facts. Perhaps if you tried studying instead of gallivanting in places you have no business being, things would be different, her father suggested, folding his newspaper in quarters and placing it beside his plate. It wouldn't make a difference, Michaela argued. It doesn't matter if I am the best student out of every academy. This was all predetermined, probably the moment I was born. They were never placing me anywhere else. Really? Her father scoffed. And why would that be? As if you don't know, Michaela snapped. It's beyond me as to why any daughter of mine would be sentenced to such a place, her father replied. You mean Mom never told you? Michaela questioned. Her mother patted down the sides of her hair. You know, I just remembered I have an appointment. Sit down, Hilda, Jed ordered. Now explain. There's nothing to explain, Hildebrew replied. I have no idea what our daughter is going on about. So you didn't know my great grandmother was a necromancer? Michaela spat out, and that the necklace you gave me helped her in her craft? Hilda, is this true? Jed questioned. Why didn't you tell me? You must have known how this would affect our family. We could all lose our jobs if it gets out. Why would you cover something like that up? Teeth grazed over Hildebrew's top lip. You act as if I had a choice. The mere mention of death magic sends people in a flurry, arms flailing as if the word alone held some great evil within it. Besides, when the woman was alive, necromancy was a valid form of magic. She broke no laws and was found guilty of nothing. There isn't a witch alive who can say they have zero connection in their family tree to one necromancer or another. I had a right to know, Jed complained, before I took my vows. Would you have not married me if I told you? Hildebrew asked. Would you have stopped loving me? Of course not, Jed replied. If anyone had a right to know, it's me, Michaela blurted out, taking a sip of her orange juice. So how about rectifying that right now? Was my great grandmother a seventh born as well? What does that have to do with anything? Her father snapped. Michaela arched one eyebrow. You know very well the seventh born in any witch family is considered to be more adept at death magic. I was thinking it might be hereditary. Was she? Jed asked. A nervous chuckle was all Hildebrew could manage at first. There is no proof that such a thing runs in the genes of specific magical families. So she was, Michaela snapped. To make sure you both understand where we stand, I've been placed in Gravedigger Academy to be watched. Apparently, there is some concern I might fancy the dead arts. I'm stuck with the placement until someone decides I am not a threat, which isn't likely to happen. That sucks, Kaz stated, standing. He patted her shoulder a few times, especially since Inter Academy Games are coming. We are going to destroy your team. Worse than destroy, Ty snickered. We're going to bury you so far down you'll need gravediggers to find gravediggers. That makes no sense, Kaz chuckled. Does too, Ty argued, putting his brother in a headlock. Not in the kitchen, Jed yelled. Take it outside. The newspaper was already unfolded and in his hands again. It was good to have things back to normal, even if it was only for one day. Her belongings had already been sent, and she'd be joining them in the morning. Watch out, Gravedigger Academy. Year 2 was about to start. Chapter 2. Red hair trailed behind her, gusts pulling it tight whenever her brother's car was in motion. There'd been a time when she adored convertibles, although all black would have been preferable to the cherry red one she was being cherried about in. Beggars couldn't be choosers, though. A ride was a ride, and anything was better than taking the dreaded bus. Do you think others found drives this year? Michaela glanced down, watching the road below for any sign of Academy provided transportation. There was none. You created quite the stir last year, Kaz said, a twinkle beaming from both his eyes and pearly whites. It's built into the nature of most people to be cautious in uncertain times. Uncertain? Michaela's glare shifted toward the driver. You think that's because of me? No! Kaz side eyed his sister before darting his gaze to the other passenger and adding a low chuckle. Yes, Ty smirked, his head shaking from side to side, disagreed with his voice. The car swerved, barely missing the tops of a few trees. Huh, Kaz's lip rose. What do you think you're saying? Don't upset your baby, sis. Eyes straight ahead, dude, Michaela ordered. You're still on flight restrictions. If you have an accident, you'll lose your permit. This jerk. Whoa, Ty chuckled. Give your sister a bit of credit. Simply being in Gravedigger Academy doesn't condemn her to a life of stupidity, and she's not an emotional fool. Besides, you should be thanking her. If it weren't for the current state of affairs, you wouldn't be flying right now. Technically, there was another year before Pops was going to let you take the apprentice test. Kaz inhaled deeply, both hands on the wheel. Did you ever consider I might have earned Father's approval on my own? A chuckle turned into a snort, and before rolling off Type's lips to form a sincere, heartwarming laugh, he held up one finger. Sorry, give me a minute and I'll consider it. Okay, all done. Same conclusion reached. Oi! The car swerved sideways the moment one of Kaz's hands left the wheel to form a fist. There was no hiding the grin twitching its way up the corners of her lips. Her brothers never changed. That was part of their charm, at least in her opinion. Michaela inhaled deeply, eyes still blankly fixated on the ground and a group of non-magical people going about their everyday lives. Maybe being oblivious was easier. She could see each of them clearly. If any of them so much as threatened to glance up, even the flashiest of magical vehicles instantly morphed into illusion, becoming puffy pillows of cotton floating serenely in the sky. Clouds were probably one of the biggest otherworldly cover ups in existence. Throughout history, no one had so much as questioned the truth behind them, and the fact they certainly had nothing to do with normal weather patterns. In reality, they were the perfect smokescreens for magic controlled modes of air transportation, albeit things weren't necessarily as easy as they once had been. Ever since the discovery of aviation, a completely new division of magic dedicated to travel control was required. Cloud coverts regulated everything from how many vehicles were allowed in the sky at once to mapping out routes to avoid planes, traffic flow, violations, and accidents. Fake puffy white creations threw pilots, air traffic controllers, travelers, and meteorologists off the scent of the deception. The closest anyone ever came to the truth came in the form of turbulence, a direct result of wizards veering off road, so to speak, looking for their own adventure. To some, breaking the law was the ultimate high, better than any drug could provide. Michaela sighed heavily. In a way, ignorance was bliss. To be able to lie on the ground, staring directly into the essence of magic, and coming away with nothing but good vibes and pleasant visions was a gift, one she could never enjoy. On the surface, being part of a covert team seemed a fairly easy task, one her mother had suggested she study. What could be easier than sky gazing after all? The truth was, no matter what walk of life one came from, the grass was always greener on the other side of the fence. Not only wasn't she qualified, she wasn't interested either. There were problems far too deep connected to that line of work. Every person had a dark side waiting for the opportunity to spring forward and take control of the reins. The worse the emotion, the darker personal clouds became. Road rage was alive and well in all walks of life. Wizards, clashing with one another, turned the skies black quickly, booming with magical ire. That's what thunderstorms were. the lightning nothing more than a misuse of mystical powers, resulting in cover up after cover up to keep the normal population at bay. Rain was the only naturally occurring part of the situation, destined to remain that way for eternity. Messing with any non magical ecosystem, after all, was a felony offense, punishable by imprisonment or death. Magical areas under the control of the crones were the exception, a jurisdiction all academies fell into. There, emotions flowed upward, setting the atmosphere. The darker the intentions below, the more gray the skies above became, swirling with unrest, foreshadowing events to come. The only thing missing from the Master Cloud plan was to send the pack of naysayers sniffing in the wrong direction. That's when stories about witches riding on broomsticks began to circulate, as if that ever really happened. Humans were gullible when they wanted to be. Sometimes they simply wanted to put faith in the unfathomable. If it hadn't been for her research, she never would have known all the intricate little details. Wizards rarely looked into magics they didn't practice, a fault of the base beliefs of their own society, perhaps. Of course, there was also the chance the very foundation she stood on was being manipulated to suit the needs of the elite handful. Segregating information kept secrets from being revealed. It was a case of sweeping the unwanted under the rug. The same had been done to necromancy years ago. What were they afraid of? Michaela, Ty bellowed. Huh? A blank stare turned toward her brother's face. Are you okay? Kaz asked. I didn't think it was possible for someone to turn more pasty white than your normal complexion. Michaela shook the fog from her head. I'm fine. She licked her lips and nodded. I'm just a bit motion sick. Her eyes enlarged, leaving the ground, flying. It's all a bit much. She clenched her fist tightly around a card. We're here, Ty said, nodding toward the building beneath them. We made good time, if you ask me. I thought you were driving all the way to the academies, Michaela complained, shooting glares between her brothers. I was hoping to stop in town on the way. Why are we here? Kaz shrugged. We're dropping you at the front door. No offense, Ty said, but we can't be seen in your part of town. It's bad for our rep. We have our own school to think of. I get it, Michaela snickered, opening the passenger door. You don't want anyone to think you aided the enemy when we beat you in that little competition this year. Spittle streamed from Ty's flapping lips, as if Gravedigger Academy has a chance. I'd be amazed if you could come up with the required number of entrants. You guys have zero school spirit. She pretended not to hear the comments as she began the free fall. Passenger identification clenched tightly in one hand. Her brother had hit the nail on the coffin, though. The student body at her school was only a tiny fraction of the other academies. It would take a miracle to find enough bodies willing to participate in a match that couldn't be won. Michaela chuckled. If only necromancy wasn't illegal. Raising the dead to enter was probably the only way they were going to place well. The smile faltered from her lips as she approached the roof entrance. Keeping the dead from rising was the curriculum gravediggers were meant to study and practice. So why did she keep veering toward the opposite? Being dropped off wasn't so much as falling as it was floating. A small cloud covered her body as a shield, bits disappearing the lower she descended. Not a single detail of the decline escaped her. All the while, the world below only saw a skyscraper, once again oblivious to the truth. A dollhouse-sized red door appeared, growing exponentially as the distance between her and it decreased. Accessing passenger drop-off spots was always the same. First came a blast of cold air, and then a tightening of the skin left prickly tingles behind. After that, the adrenaline rush kicked in, no parachute, time slowing, the quickly approaching ground, heartbeat racing. Being free felt good. It was liberating, even if the magic wasn't her own. Passenger identification cards were controlled by the crones, each one unique to the holder and only usable for access points previously approved. One couldn't simply enter any home or business they set their sights on. However, during business hours, when one door was shut, another opened. In this case, the front entrance of the school wasn't accessible, so the rooftop was. Technically, it was the second drop-off location her pass granted her access to, her house being the first. Toes pointed, prepared for touchdown, Michaela inhaled deeply, watching the door below her. Landing was never easy, not when there'd been a lot of practice. Her eyes closed, lids clenched tightly together, waiting for an inevitable tumble. The gusts of air around her slowed to a whistling light breeze. 2 fingers separated, allowing her to peek between them. She landed on her feet. Once she was over the threshold, everything simply halted. leaving her standing, albeit out of breath. Welcome back, Michaela muttered, glancing at the hallway of doorways, a returning student standing in much the same position as herself at each, yet she knew none of their faces.